Politics. So glad to talk to you. I'm Hal Ginsberg and excited to be joined by Kelly Zemnickis, filmmaker. She is the producer. Oh my gosh, I asked you, Kelly, and I was like, producer, director, writer, and you were like, I'm the producer, and I was about to call you the writer, director. Welcome, Kelly. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's okay. Rob will forgive me.
I do want to also offer our thanks to Liz Croydon, who connected us so we could do this interview. And Liz, I'm the one who really thanks you because it's great to have someone like Kelly on, a filmmaker. Tell us about No Responders Left Behind. You see that visual. I'll play the trailer. And by the way, just real quick, there are links to how you can get to see No Responders Left Behind in the show description. But Kelly, take it away right now.
Yes, so this is my very first documentary. Prior to No Responders Left Behind, I hadn't even thought of being a documentary filmmaker. So this is my first one out of the gate. I joke with a lot of friends that I started small, just a tiny topic. But it is something that in the winter of 2015, when Trevor Noah took over The Daily Show, and Jon Stewart was coming back to do a little guest spot. And I've been a longtime fan of The Daily Show, like going back to like the Craig Kilborn days. So like I'm an OG Daily Show fan. But it was Jon Stewart's advocacy about what was happening with the 9/11 community, specifically the first responders and their healthcare, that just as a woman from Canada, I was really fascinated by, because I wasn't hearing it a lot on our national news. So December 2015, Jon comes back. I didn't really know what he was going to be talking about. And he ended up reconstituting a panel from 2010. And it was a really effective visual. And we show a clip of it in the film. You can also just find it on YouTube or wherever, where they left a whole bunch of chairs empty. And it was just Jon and Kenny Specht sitting at the table. Kenny, a former member, retired member of the FDNY. It was a really profound visual to see all these empty chairs and to have Kenny speak on how some had died, some were just too sick to go to the studio. And Jon was just relaying the plea that Congress was within hours of like this bill running out of money that had been put together in 2010. And they just had hours left. He was like, tweet, worst responder was the hashtag. And I was just so moved by what I was watching. I sent a tweet, and that tweet led to the film that you're talking to me about. So it was just very beautiful being at the right place at the right time on social media. So,
well, let's get right to it. Let's play the trailer here. It's a little over 2 minutes. I think it's great. So I want folks to get to see this trailer.
As I sit here today, I can't help but think what an incredible metaphor this room is for the entire process that getting health care and benefits for 9/11 first responders has come to.
This country was based and formed on volunteerism, and those who went to 9/11 voluntarily are paying the ultimate price.
One lady said to me, you have to forget about 9/11. I gotta take 32 pills a day. I take 5 for the heart, 6 for the PTSD, lungs, cough. This is $100 a bottle. I need 9 of them. It's $900.
One of the first bills I got was $200,000.
And I had good insurance.
I see all these guys married with kids and they're losing their houses, their health.
John Feal is an extraordinary person.
You know, my parents raised me, always fight for what you believe in, and I fought.
He organized all the first responders, and he'd bring them to Washington month after month, week after week, year after year.
Today, hundreds of first responders, survivors, and families will be marching in Washington.
We're here on a mission. We're helping 9/11 responders, volunteers, and survivors.
And I know you left the business. How do you feel you made the right move?
He's fighting for people that are sick and dying. Of course he made the right move.
The combination of John Feal and Jon Stewart was pure magic.
They did their jobs. 18 years later, do yours.
John has been with us for a decade now, and he's been through the thick and thin with us.
They inspired each other, and I think that mattered.
This lobbying, I do think it's kind of a model that other folks can use.
I'm dragging these guys. Some of them with cancer, wheelchairs, oxygen tanks.
With the card here, I chased him down. Congressman and Senator, you got a minute.
He became the face of a movement with that scooter.
That's why we continue, to give people hope.
We've had to fight, overcome every obstacle, every hurdle for almost 18 years.
It's just like one thing after another.
If something like this takes this long and is this hard, something's wrong with that system.
You all said you would never forget. Well, I'm here to make sure that you don't.
When people say democracy is working, it works for some. It should work for everybody. Just be professional for about another hour, and then we can tell Congress to suck it, all right?
All right, so super powerful stuff there. I mean, a million questions going through my mind. One is, I thought I was watching The Sopranos for a minute with those accents. I mean, you can't make that stuff up. It's amazing how, bringing me right back to New York and how many New Yorkers do speak. Kelly, how did you know how to make that? I mean, this is your first. Did you go to film school? What's going on here? And how do you get a gig when you haven't done anything like this before to make something so big?
I certainly am just someone who's a storyteller at heart, and I have worked in the film and TV industry in Canada since the 90s. So along the way, I have gotten to meet people who know how to do things, and I'm somebody who's really, really big, like a big personal motto of mine is just do the thing. Like, stop talking about something you want to do. Go ahead and try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it works, amazing. So I like to not just talk about projects and ideas, but actually go and follow through with them, which not everybody does. In this case, when I saw Jon Stewart on The Daily Show, as I say, in 2015, I was so moved. Like, I was ugly crying on my couch. This just seemed like so completely wrong that we should even still be talking about this. And I had a tried and true light bulb moment, which I don't think I'd ever had before in my life. But I was like, I gotta do something. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And lo and behold, I send a tweet. I think my tweet said, as a Canadian, there's not much I can do, but Congress needs to help these responders, or something like that. I think 6 people saw my tweet, or as we would now call my ex, I guess. And not many people saw it, but one person who did see it was a 9/11 first responder who was in the audience for The Daily Show. For some reason, this guy added me. For some reason, I messaged him and said, what can I do to help you guys? And he said, why don't you talk to John Feal, who you see in the video with Jon Stewart. And John Feal and I had a call the next day. We talked for about an hour or so. And I basically ended that call by saying to him, if I bring down a camera, can I maybe talk to some of you, like some of your friends and yourself, maybe do some kind of little video thing? And he said, absolutely. When are you coming? And I got off the phone and I realized I had basically pitched a short documentary idea to a man who did not know I had never, ever done that in my life. And I reached out to my dear friend, Rob Lindsay, who I'd worked with previously on a show here in Toronto. Rob, who is a seasoned filmmaker, documentary filmmaker. And I said to Rob, I said, how do you make a documentary? And he said, why on earth are you asking me that? And I told him what had just happened on the call. And he said, get in the office. We're going to see if we can do something with this. And this was a complete free fall of trust exercise after trust exercise, because I was going to Rob with a nugget of an idea that I didn't really know what to do with, but I knew if I didn't know who John Feal was, somebody else didn't know who this guy was. And everybody just trusted each other from the word go. We didn't know what we were doing, but we knew we had something we had to film.
So Kelly, maybe you can explain something that's a little confusing to me. And you heard one of the first responders in the video say it. Maybe it was John Feal. I don't think it was. Hey, I have good insurance and I'm still paying for all this. So that's what kind of confused me a little bit. Like these first responders, they're police, they're firefighters. They really have like the gold standard, quote, Cadillac American healthcare plans. And what Stewart was presenting and that caught your attention was it's not enough. It still isn't preventing these people from having to, make choices sometimes between eating and getting their meds, between getting, what they need to save their lives and making sure their families have enough. Is that right?
Yeah, that was actually Ray Pfeiffer, the late Ray Pfeiffer in that clip who said that he had all those bills to pay for. And I think even, the way, I will just say very briefly, the way the Canadian healthcare system works is quite different to the States. But I think I did have a general assumption that if you were a cop or a firefighter, you were pretty much taken care of. But as I came to learn, as we all came to learn through making the film, is that sure, you're allotted, just for argument's sake, 3 x-rays in a year. Okay, fine. Those are covered. But because these guys were getting so sick, in some cases so quickly, and there was this commonality between all these 9/11 first responders of what they were having to be treated for, what they were coming down with, they had to get maybe 15 x-rays in a year. So you've got 3 that are covered, you've got to pay for the other 12, and that can be thousands and thousands of dollars. And if you're also dealing with whatever else is going on in your life financially, that's gonna kick you in the ass,
Yeah, it's a heck of a system we've got here in this country. And that was something we discussed before we started the live stream, which is your reaction as a Canadian, where you have not the world's best. I was looking at studies. I always like Canada's like the best, and it's much better than we have, but it's like ranked well below Japan, France, Germany. So even less than ideal, but much better than. What was your reaction when you first were confronted by this heartless, for-profit, soulless capitalist system? Not to mince words or throw trying to be gentle about it. I don't want to I shouldn't sugarcoat it for you, but yeah.
Definitely a different system. And I've had friends over the years who live in the States who, are photographers who didn't have insurance and had to make their own splint because they couldn't afford to get that done. And holding a camera is their job. So it's always baffled me, the decision between how do I feed my kid or how do I make sure I get this cough treated? Like that's always really, really blown my mind. But overall, from all the years of watching John talk about what was happening via The Daily Show, as I've said, it just blew my mind that this was a problem. This just seemed to me to be something that as a first responder, you're doing work that I couldn't dream of doing, running into a building, saving somebody from a knife fight, like whatever. I can't, I try to be a good citizen, but I can't imagine doing that kind of work. That takes a special individual. And why the struggle of proving the point of arguing, no, I seem to be sick from the time I was here. It seemed to be a fight that I was like, why wouldn't you trust this person? or help them. It just didn't seem to make sense. The entire time that we did this documentary, which top to bottom took us roughly 5 years, the whole way it was like, I don't know why we're making this. Not in a heartless way. I just didn't understand that.
Well, there shouldn't have been a need, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. You had to make it because the situation called for it, but we shouldn't have been in that situation to begin with. Kelly Zemnickis with us, documentarian. She's also a comic, chief cook, and bottle washer. I think you do it all. I just focused on No Responders Left Behind. She's also Canadian, if you hadn't figured that one out. I wanted to also, I've shared a few clips, including, or a few slides, the higher cancer rates that the first responders and also other people who were at ground zero were suffering from and continue to suffer from. So just to elucidate a little bit, those circles with the pink around them, or whatever color that is, I'm going to say pink, represent significantly higher incidences of those cancers than would have normally been observed. But because of the individual's presence at ground zero, and over time, right? I mean, you hear some of the firefighters saying we were sleeping down there, we were there for hour after hour. So all cancers, you see a significant pink ring around it. This isn't the best visual either because it looks so thin. But if you look at the thyroid, they're more than double the incidence. Prostate, leukemia, which is a blood disease, kidney. So those are the cancers that these first responders and other individuals at ground zero are suffering from.
And that's an important point to make, because it's not, and as somebody who was living in New York at the time, if you were working in the area, if you were a visitor who went down to help at ground zero, you are eligible to help to gain some sort of compensation from the healthcare program that has been set up for 9/11 first responders. There is a way. If you reach out to the FealGood Foundation, they can help you out, because it isn't just, as you say, 9/11 first responders specific. If you were down in that area, there were schools, anyone who worked around there. It's got this really interesting domino effect, because if you were working down there and you're a woman who is pregnant, your baby in utero might be having some consequences of toxins and carcinogens and general bad crap that was inhaled by your mom when she was pregnant. It's got this really, really, I don't think a lot of people would even think about that, the aftermath of a disaster zone, but the baby who wasn't even born yet could be affected by things down the line. And it's really interesting how not everything that the 9/11 first responder community, just to highlight them for the moment, is suffering from is necessarily covered by the bill, because things are being added all the time. They're noticing an increase in X, Y, or Z, or Z, however you pronounce it. Over time, Congress is going to have to add things to that bill that are currently not covered. Like when the bill first came out, cancers weren't on it, and that had to be fought for. So it's a bit of a wheel. It's not just stopping with what you showed there. Like it could be completely different. That slide could be very different in 5 years.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned that folks who were not first responders but were impacted directly by 9/11 are also receiving support, because that was going to be a question that I didn't know the answer to that, and it certainly jumped out at me. Well, I hope we're helping these citizens as well, not just the first responders.
Yeah, I hope so. And I do want to mention the one most interesting thing to me about, we've got a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page under No Responders Left Behind. It's been so interesting to me over the years, the people who have found that page, knowing that at the time we were making the film, or now that the film is out there for people to watch, people who have reached out to us to have said, hey, I was visiting, I haven't been feeling well since this date. Do you think I might be affected by what I breathed in? And then we've put them forward towards the FealGood Foundation or Michael Barish, who's a wonderful lawyer who is working with responders in the aftermath. So yeah, that has really been interesting to me that people,
and for me, I mean, I was not a victim. I remember that day very, very well. I was actually working in Washington, D.C., and I want to hear your memories in a moment. I've actually talked about this on there because you're in Canada, so I was curious about what it was like in a different country. But yeah, I know I heard something very loud that morning at my office right near the Capitol in Washington, D.C. I wonder if it was the plane that hit the Pentagon. I mean, there was a plane that hit the Pentagon. I always wondered about that, but I don't know, and I'll never know. But it was very loud, and it's not very far. It wasn't far from my office at all, just across the river pretty much. And then we were excused from work, and it wasn't until, and that was like 9:30 in the morning. Like, why are we getting, it was all happening, right? It was all like, what's going on? And it was scary stuff. And when I got home, my wife was, I walked most of the way, or a good chunk, because of the problems with transit at that point. It was a very scary time. And we were close to the DC ground zero, not New York. What about where you were? Was it in Toronto? I know that's where you are now.
I was in Toronto that day, and Rob Lindsay, who directed this film so beautifully and was a great writer for the film and co-producer, him and I were working on a TV show in Toronto. It's not on the air anymore, but it was called Royal Canadian Air Farce. I think a little bit like SNL, little daily shows, political satire and comedy. And we were prepping that day for what was our script read day. I was the script coordinator. I got into work, and I remember opening up my Yahoo Mail, and I saw a little image with a little like tower and a little, that little beacon at the top. It was like the little air. I can't think of the word right now, but they had a little picture of a building, and it said accident in New York. And my brain just was like, oh, I guess something just hit like that, tapped it as it was flying by. Like, I didn't really think much of it. And then one of the stars of the show came running in. We were the only two people in the office, and we were working in a broadcast center. So there was a 24-hour news channel. It was a hub of news. And he came running in. He said, Kelly, did you hear what's happening? I said, no. And like many people on that day, we turned on the TV just as that second plane was coming in. So we saw it in real time. And we were in the writer's office. And I looked out the window, and I was, in my 20s at the time. And I didn't necessarily, like anybody, know what was happening. But I looked out the window, and I saw the CN Tower, which was just about right across the street. And my immediate thought was, we are at war. If that CN Tower gets hit, is it going to fall on the building I'm in now? Like, it was a weird, like, where am I? What would happen if this fell? It was most peculiar, and I don't have any recollection of what happened on the show that day. I do remember making frantic phone calls to my family, because I do have family in the Bronx, and I had family that was visiting that family in the Bronx. It's a lot of phone calls. How is everybody? But it was, like that image you see, like to see that we were watching NBC News. I remember we turned on NBC, even though we were at a different channel in Canada. We should have turned on the CBC, which I apologize to CBC. But,
well, they'll forgive you. I think it's been 20 years now. And
but to see that happen in real time, I was like, what the what is happening? And when I got home, and it was just a mad rush of confusion, I think, everywhere in the world, but we certainly didn't know in Toronto if we were going to get hit next. Nobody knew anything. I remember my neighbor had a candle in the window, and I found out a day or two later that they had somebody in that building who did perish. Interestingly, because of doing the film, I got to know that neighbor who I didn't at the time in 2001. But yeah, I mean,
I'm from New York. I don't ever remember seeing that image. That's the most remarkable one I've seen, the one I just put up there. I was just sort of scrolling around while you were talking to find a powerful one. That's just extraordinary, really.
Yeah, it's a very powerful film. I will say to anybody who does want to see our movie, and I encourage you to do so, whether you were alive that day or not, we do not get into conspiracy theories at all with this. And that is a very big thing when you go into a deep dive on the internet about that day, but we don't touch on that at all. Our biggest thing is how that incident affected the health of people afterwards. So I just want to put that out there because everybody's got their opinions on what went down, and that's another chat altogether.
Well, the impact, of what on the folks who were involved. So you're talking about the health impacts, and also for far too long, the failure of the U.S. government to take care of, the 9/11 heroes and the victims. And, I don't want to get into conspiracy theories either, but whatever you want to say, I have in the past, I won't today, but whatever you want to say, our Americans were not safe. And whether you want to blame the government or how you want to put it, we were not safe. We were not protected. And we do have an obligation I believe, as a nation, all to all. And that means that when something of this magnitude occurs, we must all stand, work together to address the worst impacts of the tragedy.
Yeah, one of the first responders that we profile in the film, Mike O'Connell, who has become a good friend of mine. I've made great friends doing the film, but we always go back to how amazing the spirit was for not everybody. Because I do realize that if you look a certain way, life got a lot more difficult post 9/11. I think that's the nicest way I can put it. But there was a community bonding that happened on 9/12 that was very interesting. That I wish for those who were able to take the health benefits and put them to use and fund things would have carried on beyond some dates, because these guys have been, and these guys and gals and everyone in between they continue to struggle, and it's 2023. It's bonkers.
Yeah, I said 20. It's 22 years ago now, over 22. And you mentioned, obviously, there wasn't a significant uptick in violence against Muslims or people who were perceived to be Muslim as a result. George W. Bush is I believe, one of the worst presidents America's ever had. But to give him his due, he did speak after the event and say that we cannot target people who are Muslim or Arabs. There's not collective guilt. And that was maybe his finest hour, in my opinion, where he actually did call for unity among all Americans. Yeah. And I do give him, credit for that. Yeah. So I want to make that point, but you're absolutely right. It's typical in situations like this for people to pull together, but also to point out or to scapegoat others. I didn't, and as an American who live, here, I didn't see that much anti-Muslim or Islamophobic reaction. Now, I'm sure there were places where that transpired, but I didn't observe it. But maybe I had my head in the sand, which many people say I have it in a different orifice, but whatever. Well, sand isn't an orifice, so different place. Let's leave it at that. All right, Kelly, great to have you with me. See, this is as good as it gets, okay? This is about you don't have to worry about your job as a comic. It's not really in any jeopardy from me. I want to thank Liz. She's got some great comments in our chat. You can check them out. There's too many for me to go through right now, Liz. Sorry about that. But if you want to join us, we do take calls here. I told Kelly, so Don't make me a liar. Call in 240. You see the number on the screen, 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. So we're going to move on to a few other topics. You paid the price of coming on my program. I'm going to make you talk about other issues if you're willing to. I don't make you can always hang up, and also because you're Canadian, so you bring a slightly different perspective. Do you eat those? What are those gross things like the cheese curds? Are those Canadian? Like, what do they call those things? Poutine, right? Poutine. What's that like?
It's think of it
as
I
hear your phone. Is that your phone or is that
it's
mine?
Not my phone. It might be your phone. I know
someone's
to turn my phone
yes,
off,
because you know why? Because I told you, I hear the ring. I hear the ring, but no one else does. So, all right. Well, we have to talk about poutine first before we take your call in a moment. So do you eat, what is it like, these cheese curds and you put gravy on them?
It's from Quebec, my home province. I'm a Montrealer. It is, you can get really gross poutine in different parts of Canada. And the spelling, I apologize, but if the pronunciation P-O-O, so like poo, tin, T-I-N, so poutine is.
What did I said poutine,
A
right?
lot of people say poutine, but it's poutine.
I think we have that here too. In Wisconsin, they eat that stuff, I think.
Oh, cheese curds. I mean, come on. Potatoes, cheese curds, and gravy. That's all you need.
Yeah, I guess. By the way, I think now she's gone. Were you with her? I think, Liz, what happened? Did you drop off? I was sure I had her. Call back. I know. We did get a call, and it was ringing, and it was, well, I don't know if it was Liz, but whoever just called me from the 301, call back if you're listening.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to.
Person calls back. I want to make a quick mention. Two groups that we mentioned in the film: the FealGood Foundation and the Ray Pfeiffer Foundation. The holiday season is among us. If you're looking to a place to contribute, they are accepting donations. They're continuing to do the work that we showed in the film. So definitely support them.
All right, I'm not going to let the caller go. We've got you back. Who is this you, Liz?
Yeah, it's me, Wasabi.
How come you dropped off? Was there an issue from our end?
No, you were rapping about Putin, who, everyone thinks the Russians
Putin.
Well, she's bringing her comic stylings.
Everyone thinks it's the Russian Putin that interfered with our election, but it's the Canadian Putin that's been interfering all along. No. I've got like a couple second delay on my video feed, so I'm putting my Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
yeah.
I shut it down to a degree, and I'm walking away from the audio because that's the depth of my technicalities. I'm hiding in my Washington, D.C. bunker and enjoying the show so much. It evokes so
I
many
knew somebody
memories.
was. I mean, there is always at least one person who's really enjoying the show, and lately that's been Liz, so it's good.
Yeah. I was doing court on 9/11, and I remember going to bed the night before after a very traumatic road dogging trip, and I said, I don't want to go to court tomorrow, Mom. And all I knew was that my mother woke me up and said, honey, you can sleep in, you don't have to go to court. And then I woke up to the towers, and one of my friends had their camera footage taken of the Pentagon because they happened to be crossing the Pentagon. And I just thank goodness that John Feal and Mr. Jon Stewart rallied and directly organized. And hearing your story, Kelly, about the tweet and how it reached a network of people, it just tells me that people of good heart bring each other together and that you were meant to make this movie. And I'm so grateful that there is some sort of pillow manufactured by people's will. So
Oh, thanks.
No one can ever say that their small effort doesn't have a great effect. And thank you. It was an honor doing comedy with you, Kelly. Very funny woman.
Thank you. And Liz, a very funny woman herself. And thank you. I'm right beside my laptop here. I've got the bracelet that we were given, some of us were given when Ray passed away. But his whole thing was like, do the right thing, even if nobody is looking, which I think is a good gift to impart to everybody watching this. So
I got to tell you, I always ask myself, will I be able to live with myself and love myself after I take action on this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is what I care about. That is the bottom line. That is why I am an activist. It is not about, my activism is not about me being heard as much as it is about making certain that the unspoken for are heard.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I'll pimp my comedy out any day. But it is so validating to wake up in a world where there are so many people of goodwill doing what they are able to with what they have to make a bigger pool of resources and joy and perseverance. So I thank you. And
yeah, Liz, thanks.
sorry,
I put up a picture here. You mentioned the Pentagon. It's not a great photo. It's the best I could find.
Oh, that's great.
Also from 9/11. And yeah, I
drove around D.C. that day. It was a ghost town. It was a ghost town.
Yep.
Very.
Well, I left it. I mean, I had been there, like I mentioned, and left. It was a very scary time, very scary day, and it's great that you're doing and you did what you did, Kelly. So we thank you. Do you see this as, and don't go, Liz, but do you see this as like the future direction of your career, that is in filmmaking and documentaries, or was this maybe a one-off, or or whatever works?
Yeah, this absolutely was a tipping point, door opening moment. As much as I love doing stand-up and as much as I love making people laugh, at the core of everything for me is being a storyteller. And I'm more of a storyteller comedian. So if I can use my power to continue to make documentaries that introduce you to a person or introduce you to a topic, documentaries is the lane I want to stay in, because I love being a conduit for you to learn about somebody like John Feal or Ray Pfeiffer, or whatever documentary I am working on next. So I love getting to do this. We all have a story. Maybe not necessarily everybody's story is worthy of a documentary, but we all have a story to tell. And those that have something that I am able to help showcase, oh my gosh, I'm down for that.
Well, you're so lucky, right? I mean, and that's what I feel like I do my live stream. I'm so lucky to get to do this. And if you're a creator, and I was really curious about a bunch of things, like your aesthetic when you make movies, but so curious about differences. And Liz, you're a comic also who has made movies or made video.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about bringing this in because the filmmaking is collaborative. You have a team and you're kind of first among equals if you're the producer or director, but you've got to work with all these other people. When you go up on stage, you're basically, you're on your island. So how does that compare? And let's start with you, Kelly, but then Liz, chime in, please. Like, which do you prefer? What do you feel like you have to be herding cats when you're doing the movie? I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but just kind of putting ideas in your mind to how to respond.
I am such a person who will spew out an idea and, oh, this could go here or that could go there. I'm a bit frantic and I'm not necessarily great with always writing down my structure. Like I know what I want, but I don't necessarily know exactly how to get there. So in the documentary, it's wonderful to have this team that we can talk and communicate and get the ideas out. Oh, we're going to go this way. Okay, let's go this way. It also helps to be a really good listener in either thing that you do. Because with stand-up, you're listening to the audience. That's not working. Okay, let's go in a new direction. But I think at the core of it, I really do love being the master of my domain, so to speak. But documentary work for me is great because it allows me to like verbalize better, listen better, which in turn helps the stand-up, I think. So,
what about you, Liz? I was so fascinated. I repressed myself from making a crack about the master of your domain. Well, I guess I didn't do a very good job suppressing that joke. So go ahead, Liz. What about you? Movies versus stand-up?
Well, I love them both. And my greatest weakness when I produce comedy is that I will try to book 150 of my friends in the same night. I'll be like, okay, everybody's got 30 seconds because you're all great. And I love relishing other people's talent. And all my life, I think that I have done my comedy with the idea, and, you know, business arcs don't always go A, B, C, D and have like a classical arc. Sometimes they go A to G to C to M, back to B, D, double D, F, in progression. But originally, my idea of being a headlining comedian was all about bottom lining a foundation upon which to just turn out movie after movie after movie with my friends. I've always been interested in alternative, collaborative funding. I have like I have 5 feature comedies ready to go, and I love the documentary. I have an unfinished documentary I never got to do with these 2 great high school filmmakers, just incredibly dedicated. They went on to major in film in Cali together, and we all started working on comparing Trump to Friedrich Wilhelm, and we were talking about Duroff's pig and how Duroff trained this pig to come into a circus circle with the Friedrich Wilhelm's cap, army cap.
Quite a lot of free associating there, Liz. I don't.
Yeah, I'm still
sign of
about
genius
9/11.
or madness, one or the other.
You know,
pick.
but comedy is very different for me. Comedy is easy in the sense that I don't have to coordinate more than me, really. I just have to show up, and everything that happens on that stage, I am entirely responsible for. And that is good in the sense that I don't need to rely on anyone. And if I am let down, it is because of me. And it is bad because if I am let down, it is because of me. And I've done shows where I've gotten standing ovations and I have wept in my dressing room because I did not approve of the performance.
Wow.
So
I hear, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I really appreciate that, Liz, and your sharing. I just cut her off. I'm sorry. I do have to move on because I want to we just have about 15 minutes left and I want to get to a couple of other topics. But Liz, again, thanks so much. Please always call, always listen, and bring me more awesome guests like yourself and Kelly.
I just want to point out something quickly. I don't know if anyone watching this or you. So on my T-shirt is Mr. Dress Up, Canadian beloved TV icon. Kind of looks like you, Hal.
Is that right? Well, the glasses, right? So there you go. I'm pulling it down. I'm pulling down the video so we can get all of it. Can you?
My shirt says "Keep your crayons sharp."
I got it. I just that's all I can see. Yes, I got it.
Yeah.
I don't know. He looks a little younger. I hate to say it
cousins.
than I do.
I didn't wear it intentionally.
I remember once this woman said to me, "You really look like somebody famous," and I was like,
Mr. Drossen.
This was back in this early 80s, right? So I don't know who was. Yeah. So I'm like, I don't know, Paul Newman. So she's like, Bill Murray. And I was, that didn't feel so good. That wasn't where I was hoping you were going with that one, but I'll take what I get, I suppose. There's a Canadian A for you if you want, right? Isn't Bill? He's Canadian, I believe.
I don't think so.
Well, maybe not. He made some good movies in Canada, but I guess he wasn't himself.
He's probably visited.
He may. I'm going to look that one up.
Might make you a Canadian. I'm not
sure. So I mentioned as a Canadian, you have to speak for the entire country, and hopefully you will not, irritate people for whatever you say. I wanted to move on. So one topic that I often focus on this live stream is the climate cataclysm. I actually call it the new Holocaust because it's a fire, right? A Holocaust is a fire, and we're burning our mother up. And you experienced that this summer in a way that I don't think Canada ever has, at least as far as we know. There haven't, in maybe millions of years. What sort of triggered this, and I'll get to Canada in just a moment, a little bit more, but I just saw this article. This is December 1 in Newsweek. And we're there's a summit now to talk about reducing emissions. And Peter Kalmus, who's a climate scientist, says it's a sick joke. And basically because the oil producing and exporting countries are leading it. It's in UAE, United Arab Emirates, and they're very significantly limiting what can even be discussed. They're suppressing conversation. It would be much like when people would suppress discussion over 9/11 and what happened. They're doing the same thing. Canada has been was just, I don't know, shredded, ripped apart. I don't know. You choose the word, Kelly. What was that like this summer when you guys got hit in the mouth by the climate crisis?
Well, I mean, I certainly living in Toronto, I have witnessed on television what has happened on the west coast of the country in British Columbia and Alberta with forest fires. The degree that it happened, and I mean, with winds, we certainly have days where the sky looks a certain way because it's from all the way out in Alberta, which I think closer to like Montana and over there. I did experience that. But I've got like Post-its on my wall here that are that color orange. To see the sky and to taste something in the sky that was that color. And I was in Brooklyn at the time that the East Coast fires from like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and I think even Quebec too. I felt like I was in like a 1970s crime film. Like to have everything so sepia toned and to have it hurt to breathe and to taste that, like I say, the fact that, in the past, 10 some odd years, Toronto is now in Tornado Alley. So we get tornado warnings here in Toronto now. Where my name being that green bar, I have seen the sky go that color. I know what to do now in case of a tornado. I didn't have to go through that as a child. And I remember in the 80s, being given like books at school about like recycling and environment and having the idea that, okay, the adults in the room know how we're going to fix this by the time I am their age. And now I am their age and I see my niece and nephew and I'm like, you're screwed. I'm going to do the best I can to put the Band-Aids on what I can do. But we got to have a miracle happen and the clock is ticking. Otherwise, those, orange summer skies are going to be pretty common. And they're already far too common. I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
but
it was very thorough. And so much also that jumped to mind. You mentioned, experience in Western Canada with the fires. But of course, what you went on to point out is that this was unique in that it was the entire tier, right? It was all the way from Atlantic to Pacific that was in many places on fire. And the acrid smoke, as you describe it, we actually on occasion tasted that in Washington, D.C. area. That's how extraordinary that the conflagrations were.
It was so insane. As I say, I was in New York at the time. My partner lives in Brooklyn, so I'm there quite often. We were on our way to a Yankee game that they hadn't yet canceled, and we stopped by a bar to meet a friend for a quick drink. And then on the TV, it said the game was canceled because they weren't going to be able to play in that. We barely were able to like walk in that, and we took a sit in Columbus Circle there. And he just looked down the street, and he's a native to the area. And he said, this sort of feels and looks like it did on 9/11, just to wrap that bow together of the sky being the color it was and being in, Manhattan at the time. But yeah, like, people joke a lot about, oh, it lives in Canada, it must always be so cold. Not necessarily. Toronto can get pretty freaking hot in the summer, that we're looking at like 110, 120 on the temperatures, and that stuff wasn't the way it used to be when I moved here, but things are melting, things are burning. It's terrifying.
It's just, it's the end of the world, really. I mean, we
Scary.
are living through Armageddon. Whatever term you want to use. I saw this term Ragnarok or something, which I never knew what that was, but have you ever heard of that? Ragnarok or something? Let me see if I can find that. I think it's like
wasn't that a Thor movie? No, that was Ragnarok.
It may have been. I looked it up. It's the term that but I may be saying it wrong. So maybe that's why you're confused, because it may not be Ragnarok. I think it's the term that in Norse mythology for when it burns up, when because if you see like a Wagner opera, I don't know if you're into opera, but my mom's taken me to some of the operas and they're beautiful. And at the end of the ring cycle, everything burns up where the gods live. So I think that's what this is supposed to be. But one thing that jumped at me, so I put the blue around it, that huge pulse of carbon emission. So it's a positive feedback loop. The climate catastrophe, the human-caused fossil fuel climate catastrophe, significantly contributed to the fires. And now, because of those fires, the problem will be worse, because they themselves, by burning the wood, creates more fossil fuel emissions, GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, than we would otherwise have. So, I mean, I don't know where we go with that, except we can lament it and we can.
I don't know either, but like, I just really hope that somebody does something that starts something. I mean, I can't, I do what I can with my recycling and my composting and, how I choose to travel and all. I try to make my small changes, but I feel like it's just this endless loop of blame and the next generation. And it's like someone's like, I need like an environmental John Feal to like kickstart something, it's because I don't have kids of my own. My boyfriend has children, and so I'm in their life, and my nieces and nephews, but I really worry about what we're going to be leaving them. I worry about how I'm going to be when I'm my parents' age, and I'm possibly floating in my pod around the world.
No, I totally feel what you're saying. By the way, Ragnarok. What did I say? Ragnarok. Ragnarok is where everything burns up, and this is what Stephen Pine said about this. Is about the Canadian fires, even though he's from Arizona State. Watching mythology become ecology. It's a slow motion Ragnarok. So the mythology of the world coming to an end through fire is now actually the reality. He calls it the Pyrocene. I've heard of the Anthropocene age. That's the age of man, because we've done so much. We've so impacted on our planet. and now we're living through the fire age as opposed to the ice age. So it is terrifying. You mentioned kids. I was very reluctant to have children, and I did because my wife, it was so important to her. So, but when you see what your kids, when I see what my kids are going to live through, it's extremely upsetting and painful to contemplate.
And like doing no responders and learning about what was in the environment and what was breathed in. We don't necessarily, you think like maybe, okay, the fires are done, let's carry on. But all of that stuff has this effect that continues either in what we eat or what we drink or how we're going to feel maybe in a couple of years. Hopefully with what we've shown in our film and what we're talking about right now, people are just more aware of like the ripple effects of what we go through. And like, it was mentioned in our doc, one of our doctors talked about how like, if you break one halogen light bulb, not a big deal. But when you think about those towers coming down and all the fluorescent light bulbs that broke and all of the stuff people inhaled, much like those fires, just watch how you feel. If you notice something's funky, you had been around an area that was maybe closer to the source of those fires, just take a bit of a check of seeing how you're feeling, because the ripple effect, we got to pay more attention to. Just because a crisis ends and it stops doesn't mean that the effects of it don't.
Right.
Well.
No, I understand. I'm just nodding. I'm listening. I'm not I get it. So, because you're very clear and powerful in your message, and I appreciate that. Kelly, I think we've got a topic for your next documentary. That would be the climate crisis, right? I mean, I think
I've actually started to noodle some ideas with Rob about another area of first responders and climate.
Right, because those firefighters, and I know, I used to live in California, and we're putting those firefighters through hell, right? I mean, literally, like a lake of fire.
The truth is, even here in Canada, like just with firefighters, briefly, not every province sort of sees the same healthcare. I've got this. Well, if you're in this province, then we don't count that as a crisis. But if you live in this province, so there's still no like fluidity to how we're treated, even in this country. So there's a
and let me just be, there are things I admire about Canada for sure, but I will criticize everybody and everything. And Canada kind of getting what it deserves a little bit. I mean, you have been a petro state. You have definitely given a lot of power and influence to the oil companies. Alberta is a giant oil, well. And, so I'm not saying it's not all, it's so often life isn't fair, right? Like what we've taken the goodies, the West, the North, United States and European countries have taken most of the world's goodies and we've exported the crap that, after you eat your goodies, you go to the bath, you take a dump, and we've dumped it in the third world. Here's a case where Canada has been a bad global citizen when it comes to the environment, and it's getting some of its just desserts.
Yeah, I would like to think that we're doing the best we can to I don't know if reparations is the right word, but I hope we're starting to do better here. I have hope. We are by no means, as you say, we have done some disastrously horrible things to environment and the peoples who were here before us. But I have hope. I always remain hopeful. I think if I'm a pretty hopeful gal, and I think if I'm the one who's like, we're screwed, then, it says something, because I always try to see something with some optimism. But I do hope Canada going forward into the next year will start to do better.
Well, I just want to be clear that I'm always more critical of my own country and my own people than anyone else. So the U.S. deserves more blame for sure. But it's disappointing.
Our hands aren't clean up here. Yeah.
Yeah,
like
it's disappointing me that a country I've admired from, much of my time on Earth and many aspects of Canada I've truly thought were beautiful, and the healthcare system being one, but just the beautiful lakes and environment. Yeah. And yet when it came to the oil companies and the extraction industry, Canada has not been a leader in a good way, unfortunately.
No.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. Let's end on a somewhat somber note. I'm sorry. We should be telling jokes and laughing and cackling, but sometimes there's a time for, I guess, tears as well. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thanks for having me. I've really appreciated it.
Great to talk to you. I'll be back tomorrow with Politics, and we wish Kelly. Oh, we'll put some more links. There are some links in the show description, but if you send me some more, we'll put them right up there so people can get more information about No Responders Left Behind, and also the specific challenges that the fighters, the first responders are still facing, and how we can help them. And that'll do it. I'll see you all tomorrow.